Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our 19th Core Devs call. As always, a little bit of context. The purpose of these calls are for core contributors to present what they've been working in the community on what's coming and brainstorm with core working groups, task forces, and community members like you. So it's so much happening. Yeah, it's also hard to fit everything into a 1 hour slot and have lengthy discussions. So while there's time for Q&A after each topic, you're highly encouraged to continue the conversations over over forums and Discord and GitHub. Everything is out there in the open, so we do want to hear from your feedback, from you and your feedback and questions you might have. So I'll paste in the chat and the video description also the links to the Graphs ecosystem calendar, so that you can be subscribed to future calls. And there's also, I'll also post a link to a new forum category where core developers are sharing their updates as well on a monthly basis. So that's I highly recommend you, going back to the forums and seeing all of those. Okay, for today we have 4 topics on the agenda, starting with Building 2.0 and Studio updates. Let me just quickly take a look at the chat. Okay. Yeah, thanks BK, the beeping sound. Yes, they're back. Thank you. So yeah, Building in Studio, we've been talking about our plans to augment the user experience, especially for developers and consumers. BK from EdgeNode has already walked us through some of the upcoming changes, I believe a month or 2 months ago. Yeah, a month ago. And so there's been great progress. And today we'll take some time to hear what is coming on this new building system that's bringing much requested features like fiat payments, predictable pricing, and just a better and simplified overall user experience, really. Then somewhat related, BK will also talk about, but more focused on the indexers and developers. Will also share what's been discussed in the protocol Econ working group around potential improvements to the indexing rewards and curation system. Internally, I think we're calling it direct indexer payments, right? And the official GIPs will soon be out as well. We'll be sharing those in our GitHub repo, but also in the forum, so you can all go back and give us some feedback on. Then the L2 migration roadmap. We've also been covering this larger initiative during these last calls, and there's been a lot of progress here as well. You might have seen in the forum a recent thread around migration helpers that's targeting indexers and delegators to facilitate migrating stake to Arbitrum or the L2. And so we'll use today's call to know more a little about these tools, what's coming to the studio, but also what the recent thinking is on the protocol issuance. That will also be migrating to L2 or Arbitrum. And yeah, that's basically the indexing rewards that will slowly be enabled on Arbitrum, which is where all the protocol lives. And so, shifting gears a little bit, Substreams. This is all about building subgraphs, following the well-known and beloved subgraph development experience, while leveraging Substreams, sort of as a separate ETL pipeline or framework, which allows for more performant indexing speeds. And so it's pretty cool. Masari has also been building a few. There's a couple of examples out there that we'll be sharing here as well. And I believe we'll have Robin from Masari doing a demo here. And so, yeah, we'll see today what it looks like, what that stack looks like, the roadmap there to bring it to the network, and also the indexing performance gains we are already seeing. So yeah, that's all for today's agenda. Again, after each topic, we'll give everyone some time to go over to do some Q&A. And so, yeah, welcome everyone. Let's get started. BK, you're up. You should be able to share your screen now. Let me know if
Great,
that's
thanks, Pedro. And I'll hand over the admin, letting everybody into you for now.
Yep. Thank you. And we're seeing your screen.
Great.
Screen.
Excellent. Perfect. So, okay, so I'll be reading a little bit, so I apologize for that in advance, but overall, this should take hopefully about 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll leave some questions at the end for any kind of feedback or questions you guys have. So, yeah, so generally, I'm a product manager. My name is BK, or Brandon Kramer. I'm a product manager at Edge and Node, and I'm mostly focused on pricing and payments at the moment. I'll spend around 10 to 15 minutes talking about this, and then we'll leave some time for questions and comments at the end. So generally today, the graphs billing experience leaves a little bit to be desired. If you're a subgraph developer or consumer, you'll log into Subgraph Studio, which is here at the top. You'll click on billing and or connect your wallet, and then you'll need to add GRT here in the middle. A pane will open up, as you see on the right-hand side, and you have to go through a few steps. First, you'll have to acquire GRT, and that can be somewhat of a time-consuming process, especially if you use a centralized exchange, like I have to in New York. It can be like 7 to 10 days. You have to wait to acquire GRT, and be allowed to transfer that out depending on how much you have. Once this is completed, you'll have the additional obstacle of needing to know how much GRT you'll need to deposit and how that translates to queries each month. And then ultimately, after you've figured all of that out, you'll be able to allow and add GRT to pay your billing balance. So obviously, this isn't the ideal experience, but in recent months, it's gotten a little bit better. That said, there's still some room for improvement, and that's what I'll be talking about today. Okay, so billing 1.0 is, as many of you may know, it's pretty flexible, kind of like pay-as-you-go billing system or payment system. But right now, you're only allowed to pay in one currency. It involves a lot of friction, as I just pointed out, some waiting, a little too much trust, and ultimately makes it a little difficult for a consumer to be able to predict how much a subgraph is going to cost on a monthly basis. And that's really what we're hoping to be able to address with some of the upgrades that I'll be talking about today. Moreover, there's a lot of complications on the back end to be able to run a billing system. It's a kind of a cumbersome infrastructure, quite time consuming to set up and also operate. So based on the feedback that we've gotten from users over the past several months, we're already in the process of shifting to a kind of a new billing system that complements the one that we already have set in place. So billing 2.0 is essentially we're aiming to offer the flexibility of pay-as-you-go alongside new monthly subscription plans that help users lock in a set number of queries at a fixed price. Initially, we'll be able to offer these subscriptions to a smaller group of beta testers with the goal of graduating to a fully integrated billing experience that has kind of billing 1.0 as a pay-as-you-go and billing 2.0 with subscriptions. So I'll state kind of in advance here that what you're seeing on your screen and the specifics of these plans may change, but this is kind of a general outline of what we're hoping to be able to offer in the coming coming period here. So as you enter kind of this subscription or payment process, what we're hoping to do is first a consumer or subgraph developer that's going to pay is looking to first pick a plan. Well, the specifics of these plans might change. What we're hoping for is around 3 to 4 plans to be able to choose from. In the first example on the left-hand side, you see a consumer plan where users are allowed to kind of lock in the set number of queries. Let's just say 1 million queries for 100 USDC, and these numbers are not necessarily what our pricing plan would be. Just an example in this particular case. And for subgraph developers that don't want to deal with publishing, curation, or upgrades, there'll be this option here in the middle that's the developer bundle, which kind of abstracts a lot of those complexities away while still being able to lock in the set number of queries. And really, the main goal of this is to be able to say, okay, I'm going to pay 100 USDC this month, be able to lock in that amount, and then be able to go forward throughout the month, knowing that you'll have this subscription set in place. On the far right-hand side, this is the pay-as-you-go system that is much like what we have today. Essentially allow users to add in a set amount of deposit at any point they want to, and just be able to pay for the amount of queries that they're using as time goes on. The next phase in this process would be to estimate the number of queries that a user might want. So in this case, they'd be able to enter our UI and then be able to say, I want 1 million queries. Choose a slider that allows you to get to that 1 million queries, and then it would give you an estimate of how much that would cost. Alternatively, if you just want to, if you know that you only want to pay 100 USDC or something like that, you can choose this option, and it'll tell you how many queries you'll get with that set amount. But overall, this kind of takes away the element of guessing or having to already have the experience of knowing how many queries you have. This will be the case, or there'll be a feature offered in this new billing system that allows you to kind of estimate that. And if you're not familiar or don't have that previous experience on the network, you'll be able to touch base with a solutions team or a number of other community members to be able to help you with some of those estimates as well. And the last aspect here, or the last phase here, we have the different ways that you can choose to pay. The Graph's existing billing system only accepts GRT at the moment. And for this, for those interested, I recommend that you keep your eyes peeled a little bit later today or in the coming days for an announcement about this in particular. There's going to be an announcement about fiat payments that we're really excited to release. So please keep your eyes peeled on that. The forthcoming subscription system, however, which is likely to come a little bit later, is looking to open up stablecoins, especially USDC, as a payment option. So this would mean that users would have the ability to pay in fiat, pay in USDC, or to pay in GRT, depending on the billing system. And this really optimizes kind of different onboarding flows, some Web 2 or up to the more experienced Web 3 developer. So again, lots of options to kind of choose from your plans to be able to estimate how much you're going to be charged or paying on a monthly basis, as well as different options for choosing how to engage in those payments. So overall, a much more expanded billing system, but hopefully still streamlined and pretty straightforward for users to understand. So we can look at it like this. Ultimately, what we want to be able to offer a number of these advantages. Again, keep the flexible pay-as-you-go, but also offer monthly subscriptions, have a built-in cost and query estimations, a streamlined payment flow that is not so complicated, not so confusing, but really just straightforward 1, 2, 3. You make these decisions, you're able to choose from those options and then move forward. And ultimately, our hope is to be able to offer something that's much more automated and recurring. Mainly, we want to be able to offer these automated and recurring payments so that users can set up their plans, pay in the currency that they want, and then set this on a recurring payment, much like the credit card systems that exist today in Web 2, only without the burden of having to give somebody your credit card to store and worry about that, all the downsides of that. So ultimately, this is kind of where we're headed. The added advantage here is that the billing 2.0 system that we're proposing and working on right now also has some added advantage for those that are running the billing systems. It's a much more streamlined backend and allows the operations to be somewhat streamlined or quicker as well. So thinking about this in kind of a big picture, the milestones that we're headed for, the thing that I'm most excited about is to eventually get to the point where at the very bottom here, you see this set it and forget it type billing experience. And what I mean by this is that a consumer essentially should be able to set up the plan that's right for them from the options, or perhaps even more options that are available, to be able to set that up, turn on recurring payments, much like the credit card systems in Web 2, and then largely set it and forget it, not have to think about this. It just automatically pays on a monthly basis or a periodic basis, so that you can think about your DApp or developing your project rather than the payment system and what you need to do there in terms of manual transactions and things like that. So in order to get to that, there are a few milestones that we have to check off along the way. So the first big one that you should keep your eyes out for are fiat payments. And again, there should be a fairly imminent announcement. Keep your eyes out for that. The second thing that we look to do is set up subscriptions. And as I mentioned earlier, this is something we're already in the process of working on. Edge and Node hopes to drop an MVP that will be open to a group of beta testers to be able to make sure that this feature or that subscriptions are kind of up to par, so that we're offering a really good experience. And ultimately, the benefits of this are that we can offer users a much more predictable experience. We can also have the ability to pay in stables as well as fiat, and it really streamlines the billing backend for those that are operating billing systems, which I think is an added advantage that not necessarily everybody will get to see. The next step, or kind of one of the next steps, I'll say, not necessarily committing to this particular order here, but one of the next steps in the process is then to think about managed subgraph payment plans. And this is along the lines of a developer bundle that I mentioned earlier, where users that are a little bit more inexperienced to Web3 can be able to have a subgraph that they pay for a plan, and that the entity that's offering that particular plan would be able to publish, curate, and upgrade for those subgraph developers or consumers. In that case, it kind of streamlines the onboarding process, makes it much easier to know what you're going to get when you sign up, and be able to kind of automate that process as well. So if you want to focus just your project rather than the subgraph, you can do that. After that, we're looking to move towards auto recurring payments, and this would essentially be a weekly or monthly task, perhaps even a trigger that if your balance is running low, you'd be able to fill it up to the correct amount. And at that point, bringing all these things together, we'd be able to have this set it and forget it experience that would hopefully streamline a lot of the billing issues that users are experiencing today. So that is kind of what we're hoping for over the coming months, be able to achieve all of these things and ultimately offer this more streamlined experience. So that's part one. Really, hopefully not too much repetition there, and hopefully the big points came out with billing. I'm going to move on to curation and cover the last maybe five minutes or so on this. Okay, so for everybody that's familiar with curation, we'll say that this is somewhat of a controversial topic. We've been talking about it for several months now, and much like billing, curation has a lot of room to improve. Curation v1.0, for instance, was the graph's initial mechanism that still exists on the graph Ethereum today. And as many of you may know, the main point of curation is to allow subgraph developers, consumers, and curators the opportunity to add signal to a subgraph to attract and compensate indexers to index a subgraph's data. It's basically a way of getting quality of service and saying, hey, my subgraph is important, please index it. Today, it takes around 4,000 to 10,000 GRD to get high quality of service indexing on the subgraph on the graph network. And most have very few problems today, but that isn't to say that this mechanism is perfect. So the curation experience right now, for instance, it's not perfect. It poses risk to both indexers and subgraph developers. It sometimes fails to fully ensure that subgraph developers will be able to control for their quality of service on a subgraph at any given time. And this is partly due to subgraph developers, consumers, and curators not always sharing the same financial incentives. It's partly due to signal not being directly connected to indexers' costs. And it's also due to a slew of other reasons that we don't have the time to go into today. That said, curation v1.x has mitigated some of these problems to a certain extent. It was implemented on the graph Arbitrum and has really fixed a lot of the issues around like bonding curves and allowing some graph developers to have less risk when they're being affected by these other stakeholders that are adding signal to a subgraph. So unfortunately, v1.x was not really meant to be a long-term solution. It wasn't meant to solve all the problems that we could have solved or that we can solve with curation v0 or v1.0. So what we're really looking to do is kind of move forward with a new mechanism and be able to address the core issues that we've recognized within curation and be able to offer a better system for all the personas in mind. Okay, so what we're moving towards is a proposal called DIPS, or direct indexer payments. And the essence of this is that DIPS recommends that developers and consumers should be able to directly pay indexers for the work that they do without the confusion of converting these payments to signal on a bonding curve. Generally, the latest version of DIPS proposal envisions a marketplace where indexers can post their initial and ongoing indexer prices to developers or consumers, and then they can easily add DIPS or payments when publishing or upgrading to ensure that they get a high quality of service on their subgraph. And this proposal aligns quite nicely with the billing proposal outlined before, meaning that it can go well with both the pay-as-you-go option as well as the subscription plans that I detailed before. So before we can really advance the curation side of DIPS and start to implement that, design and implement that rather, is that we would have to have indexing rewards change as well. Today, indexing rewards are largely predicated on the amount of signal on subgraphs. And another system would need to replace the signal mechanism to define how indexers are subsidized for the ongoing work they have, or the ongoing role that they have in growing the graph network. So moreover, indexers also need to actively set prices on these indexing costs that they would post, which is a non-trivial operational cost for most entities in the ecosystem. So if we're thinking about this in terms of bigger milestones, of things that we need to move forward, again, I just want to say upfront that I'm not necessarily, or we're not necessarily committing or saying that this will happen in this particular order, but some of the milestones that we're kind of looking out for and hoping to see over the coming period here is first, you'll likely see a GIP or a graph improvement proposal on indexing rewards be released, with the objective of generating debate on the graphs community members, especially among indexers, about how the proposals for changing indexing rewards would unravel and how that would impact not only indexers, but other members of communities or other members of the community, excuse me. Second, assuming that you can surpass a critical threshold of at least partial consensus on this particular issue, we would then be able to kind of shift into the DIPS curation mechanism, start to design and implement, and see how that would affect user flows and ensure that things are in fact getting easier for curators. We have a fair degree of consensus already from previous offsites and discussions amongst the community, knowing that we have a strong proposal with DIPS. But again, how indexing rewards will be affected is still kind of an open question that we have to have more considerable debate about. In the meantime, it's worth mentioning that we are going to try to use this managed subgraph payment plans as a way of kind of mitigating some of the pitfalls or current pitfalls of curation 1.0 and 1.x, mainly in trying to abstract away some of those curation complexities from users that don't have interest in pursuing that or engaging with that. So being able to offer managed subgraph plans where you can cover all of those things would be a way of streamlining that for the time being until we can move into a more sufficient solution for how curation would be handled in the long term. Okay, so with all that said, thank you for your time. I'll open up the floor for questions and comments. And I see there's a bunch in the chat already. So.
Yes, a bunch of questions in the chat already. Thanks, BK.
Cool.
Do you want to go through the questions? Let's see.
Sure.
Yeah, is this building system specific to Yen and Gale or does any feature? Yeah. No, wait, what is it? I lost that one. Oh yeah, Matthew is also asking, as more blockchains are added to the decentralized network, will the building system accept payments from those blockchains, either native token or like USDC, which is on those chains, or always need to pay from Ethereum? I'm just reading out loud so that it's in the recording.
Sure. So I guess I'll address Matthew's question first. No, that's not necessarily the case. The way that this particular billing system is set up is right now that the contract that we're moving to, the billing subscriptions contract, is on Arbitrum. So all payments, my understanding is that this particular mechanism would accept any ERC20 token. However, it would require a different contract for each of those tokens. So in our case, we're really interested in trying to offer stablecoins so that our MVP will only offer USDC as a payment type. But obviously we'll we want to kind of expand that to have accepting GRT. There's probably an argument for having things like ETH or other tokens as well. That's not currently within the scope of what we're doing, but we have the billing 2.0 kind of mechanism or the graph subscription protocol is fairly robust enough to be able to have different billing operators think about this and accept the tokens or currency that they want to kind of optimize for their situation. So, but my understanding is that they're all currently on Arbitrum, but this is probably a better question for Theo. I can follow up and get a more thorough answer on that. So I'll take Derek's question next. With DIPS acting as the coordination between consumer to indexers, will there be a curator stakeholder role? Yeah, great question. I think in our current designs, we are prioritizing the role of indexers and subgraph developers or consumers to ensure that they're able to achieve both of their goals, mainly to be able to control quality of service on a subgraph. I personally do think that there is a role for curators in this mechanism. However, I think there does need to be a little bit of research to determine in what ways the curation role has not necessarily achieved what it's set out to do. It is really about attract and compensate indexers, where that hasn't always been the case in the past. So at the moment, I think there's more research to do there. But I know that is an active thing that we're discussing. So sorry, I don't have a better answer for you, but that's currently how at least I'm thinking about it. And, worth thinking about it a little bit more, obviously. Perfect. Yeah, and I see a note from Yaniv for expanding the role of the curator, which is great. Okay, so I'll move on to Yaniv's question up here from the very top. When users pay in fiat or USDC, is the currency converted to GRT before being used in the network, or is the protocol being changed to accept fees in the currency or in other currencies? Yeah, that depends on the billing system. So in the case of fiat, users are, at least in the current scope of how we're thinking about this, users will be able to go into the existing billing system. They'll have the option to pay in either GRT or fiat. They'll jump out to a fiat payment system and be able to acquire GRT there, and it will go directly to their billing balance. So it is streamlined, but they are still technically paying in GRT. I think there are other proposals, or there are other systems here. So the subscription protocol would not be in GRT. The payments would be accepted in USDC initially, and then we would expand beyond the MVP to accept GRT and USDC at least. The potential for any ERC20 token, but that's not currently something we're kind of set on yet. I think there is another possibility, something that we've explored as well, is thinking about direct fiat payments that would be, obviously in this case, not shifting from fiat to GRT, but instead just allow direct fiat payments, and that would require likely a third party. There are some advantages for, kind of like these bigger companies, that more traditional companies, but that's not currently within the scope of what we're trying to do, but something we're definitely open to discussing a little bit later on to streamline some of the onboarding for these larger entities that are more in the traditional finance space. Let's see. Great. Yeah, just to call out Brandon's comment as well, to iterate, query payments between gateways and indexers are still in GRT. Yes, that is correct. And what I'm talking to, yes, is much more between the consumer and the gateway. So, but all indexers and gateways will be transacting in GRT. Let's see here. So another question here, could there be an API access to monitor billing API key usage for a particular account? Yes, and so Simone has already followed up on that. There is a subgraph for that. It looks like DavLooker also has dashboards, as Pedro's mentioned. I don't think there are any other outstanding questions there, but feel free to speak up if I'm missing something here.
Yeah, I also pinged Nana to try to answer this if she wanted. I didn't realize she was not co-host. Nana, if you want to write in the chat or just speak, you're now able to.
Yeah, I was just going to say the API key usage is exposed through Studio. I wanted to share a few screenshots for more clarity. I'm trying to get that in.
You should be able, Nana. If not, I can share the screenshots you sent me.
Sorry, I was sharing my screen.
Oh, she's sharing in the chat.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm not sure if you're talking, but you're on mute now.
Yes, sorry, I think I have some internet issues, but this would be the overview of the API keys that we're currently storing in our database.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make sure I add those to the recording so that others can then see it too. I'll just attach.
Perfect.
And
it's worth calling out too that we'll be offering some more additional features with billing 2.0 as well, so that users will be able to monitor the amount of queries and the overall cost that they have for billing 2.0 or billing 1.0, depending on the system. Over time. So in billing 1.0, as it's pay as you go, you'll be able to see the payments that you have on a weekly or monthly basis. And in billing 2.0, where you have a subscription, you'll be able to trace how much you obviously how much you paid and how much of that subscription or how much of the queries that you've locked in are being used over the course of time. And we'll be able to offer kind of this system where you'll be able to fairly easily renew ultimately be able to do that automated, obviously, and then this other opportunity to upgrade or downgrade if you want to change the amount of queries that you have. So you won't be necessarily set. You'll be able to pretty flexibly adjust your plan when you know that's the case, and obviously kind of an analytic system to be able to overlook that. Initially, first fairly small, but hopefully that's something we can expand in the future.
Great, thank you so much, Mikhail. Thank you all for your questions. Thanks, Nan, also for jumping in and help. Simon too. We, in the interest of time, we have to move forward. Thanks, BK, again. Pablo, I think you're up. I just quickly mentioned what this will be about in the beginning, so I'll try to save some time and let you go for it.
Hey, folks. Thanks, Pedro. I am going to share my screen. Let's see if this works. Can you all see the L2 updates slides? Okay, great. Cool. So as Pedro mentioned, we already did an update about this last month. So there are some things where, okay, there. There are things where I'm not going to repeat the whole presentation from last time. I would recommend, if you want more detail, you can watch the recording for the February Core Devs call that has some more information on the things that we did previously. But still, for a bit of context, we are working on scaling the graph on Arbitrum, and this means migrating the protocol contracts to Arbitrum so that all participants can interact with these smart contracts running on Arbitrum instead of the ones on Ethereum. But in the meantime, we have contracts running on both Ethereum mainnet and Arbitrum 1. And this was launched as part of stage 1 for the bridge. So we launched a bridge that allows you to send GRT from the Ethereum mainnet network to Arbitrum 1. And we've launched all of the contracts on L2 only without indexing rewards. So there is a fully functioning protocol that runs on Arbitrum 1. It just doesn't have indexing rewards. And obviously, this means there's little incentive for indexers to actually set up operations there. And therefore, there's still, not a lot of capacity in terms of serving subgraphs, and therefore not a lot of subgraphs. But hopefully, we can change this in the near future. So stage 2 would be to enable indexing rewards on the Arbitrum 1 network and slowly move the issuance, the GRT token issuance, from currently 100% on mainnet and 0% on Arbitrum to eventually the other way around, and we'll have 100% of the issuance on Arbitrum 1. But we're going to go slowly because we want to be very careful and make sure that everything works along the way. And then finally, there is a stage 3 that is also coming very soon, that is having migration helpers so that protocol participants can very easily move their states, their GRT, from the mainnet contracts to the Arbitrum 1 contracts. So for subgraph developers, being able to migrate a subgraph, for curators, be able to move their signal from the subgraph on L1 to the migrated subgraph on L2, and in the same way for indexers to be able to move their stake to L2, and delegators to move their delegated stake from the indexer on L1 to the migrated indexer on L2. So all of this is coming very soon. As part of this, we did some MIPS missions. So for those not familiar, MIPS is a program that incentivizes indexers to perform some missions for points, which is being used mostly to test and prepare for launching new chains, new index chains on the network. But we also did some special optional missions to test all of the L2 contracts on the Arbitrum Goerli testnet. So there were a few bumps along the way, but this was part of what we wanted to have to iron out all of the wrinkles. So I would say the missions were a success. We had about 300 participants doing different actions like staking, delegating, allocating to subgraphs, and actually serving queries on the Arbitrum Goerli testnet. Through this process, we had some great feedback on the products, all of the UI, some bugs that came up, and we were able to, our products team was able to fix because of this. And while doing this, we validated that the contracts, the gateway, the subgraphs, the products, everything works well together. So we have a fully functioning protocol with all of the things around the contracts that actually working properly as well. So we tested this on testnet, and then just as a more general update, we've done that. Okay, now we think we're quite ready to deploy stage 2 and actually enable rewards on Arbitrum. So as part of the testing plan, we first deployed this to testnet, and this happened yesterday actually. So if you're running an indexer on Arbitrum Gurley, you might have noticed that your allocations are suddenly giving you indexing rewards. So we redirected 5% of the fake testnet GRT issuance from Gurley to Arbitrum Gurley. And because we're so close to finishing the testing, and this is, today, tomorrow, just a few more tests missing, if everything goes well, we will deploy the L2 rewards issuance to Arbitrum 1 next week. And obviously, this requires transactions from the council multisig to enable the upgrades, and then to actually set that 5% issuance on L2. If you want to read the details about this and how it all works, check out JP43 and its predecessor JP37 that actually explains how the new issuance system works, so that we can issue and mint GRT both on L2 and on L1. So assuming everything goes well, next week or soon thereafter, as soon as the transactions are signed, an indexer that is allocating to subgraphs on Arbitrum 1 will see a small amount of rewards being issued. Well, it could be a big amount if there are a few indexers and so on, but basically there's going to be a little bit of rewards on L2, and there's going to be a little bit less rewards on L1 as we shift the issuance 95% on Gurley, on mainnet, and 5% on Arbitrum 1. At the same time, the contracts for stage 3, that are these migration helpers, are going through the last audit. We already audited all of the subgraph and curation migration helpers, and we're auditing the stake and delegation and vesting contracts migration helpers. For details about this, you can check out GIP46 in the forums to see how all of these migration helpers would work. If, assuming things go well with the audit, we would be launching first the subgraph and curation migration helpers, and a few weeks after, or a little bit more after, the stake and delegation migration helpers. So as we do this, we will propose to the council to increase the L2 rewards. As it's going to be easier for people to move over to L2, it would make sense to incentivize also that L2 a bit more and increase the rewards, so that we can, move forward towards this 100% issuance on L2 target. Assuming the community is happy with how things are going on L2 as well. And while we're doing this, the Agent Node products team is also working on the UI development for all of these migration helpers. So obviously, making these easy to use is going to be very important, so that people can actually do it. And there's also work on changing network subgraphs done by one from GraphOps. And a few other things around it that are happening, so that we can get everything ready. So yeah, this is the current state of things. Big things happening this week and the next, and hopefully soon after, once we finish audits and the UI and everything, we're going to have the helpers, and we can move full steam ahead on going to Arbitrum. So I think that's all I had. So I don't know if we have time for questions. I'm going to stop sharing now. Thank you all.
Thank you, Paulo. Yeah, I see Mark have a question. There's a question, and Jim as well. Pablo, do you want to answer Mark's question? The question is,
yes.
Is it
so Mark,
can you read the question, Pablo? It's in the recording.
The question is it still expected that owners of fully vested I assume token lock contracts will be able to use normal migration helpers? Important to have an assurance on this before most indexers start setting up on L2. Yes, that is what we want to do. We need to get the approval from the entities that issued those vesting contracts, and I think in most cases that's the foundation. Yeah, I'm not sure, but we're working to get the explicit approval for that. But that is definitely the plan. People that have fully vested vesting logs, they shouldn't need to use the special vesting log migration process. They should be able to just use the normal migration process. We just need to get everyone on board because that's going to take some logistics to actually move those vesting contracts into a new vesting contract manager contract, and then authorize those normal migration helper functions. So that is our plan. I haven't updated that on the forums yet because we're discussing among the core devs and foundation to make sure that this is approved and there are no unexpected issues with the plan. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's an important one.
Yeah. Jim, I think you can speak.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes, indeed.
Yep.
Hello.
Hey, Pablo, thanks for the update, man. I appreciate it. I just had a quick question. If I want to set up a new indexer today on layer 2, let's say I just fund one with 100K GRT, which is the threshold at which I need to meet in order to deploy an indexer, completely separate from my existing mainnet one, will I be able to then use a helper to move my existing operation on mainnet to the address that I'm already running with a potentially different set of parameters to that new L2, and then eventually deal with all the, ENS and all that later down the line?
Yes. So if you have a vesting contract that is not fully vested, then no, because you'll need to migrate your vesting contract first to get what your L2 address would be to operate. If you're using a fully vested vesting contract or just a regular, multi-sig or normal address, then yes, you can just start a new indexing operation on L2. And when you migrate the stake from L1, you can specify the L2 beneficiary to be that address that you're already using on L2. So what will happen is you'll just be sending that L1 stake to that existing L2 indexer instead of creating a new one. Not sure if that answers your question.
That fully answers it. Thanks very much, Pablo.
Cool, sure thing.
Nice. Thank you, Pablo. I'm not seeing any question in the forum. Do raise your hand if you want to speak, or just write your question in the chat. I'll just give you a couple seconds. If not, we'll move over to the other topic.
And if there are more questions, feel free to also ask in the forums, especially the GIP46 post. There's been some good conversation there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks all for the feedback. I did post the links to those threads in the chat. I'll also post it in the video description. So yes, great call. Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions, so let's move over. Thank you again, Pablo. Always nice having you. I believe we'll have Robin from Masari. I just made you co-host. Can you try to speak? Oh, wait a second. Okay. Robin, you can try now, please.
Is that better?
Oh yeah, there you go. Hello.
Perfect. Great. I'll share my screen. Oh, it's disabled screen sharing as well.
You can now, Robin. You can now.
Sorry, just 1 second. So I'm gonna have to drop and get back on the call. Just be 1 second.
Yeah. If it's locked, no, it's off. Okay, we can wait a couple seconds. Yeah, like I mentioned in the beginning, this is the Substreams powered subgraphs that we've been working on, and Masari has some great use cases ready to showcase here. So we'll be talking about what they've been building, the indexing performance, performance indexing speeds that we've been seeing, and hopefully talk a little bit about how we can bring this to the network soon. So I see, Robin, you're sharing your screen already. Chrome, full screen. Yeah, I see tabs as well. But Robin, can you, oh, sorry, just a second.
Is it better?
Yeah. We can hear you now. You're sharing your browser, your Chrome window. I mean, or actually, I'm sorry, your full desktop. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So I just wanted to talk briefly about my sort of developer experience when we worked on the network subgraph powered by Substreams for Ethereum. So this is here synced. It took roughly a week to sync. So I think our subgraph for the equivalent took 2 months. So it's roughly 8 times quicker, which is pretty great. It's almost exactly the same. There are a couple of limitations we found when it came to taking stats data. We had a couple objects that couldn't be replicated, but almost everything is kind of there on the graph. We've got for this one, it's just tracking network entity with some snapshots for days and hours. And yeah, we've kind of copied everything exactly the same. So we, tracking proper stats for a lot of things, counts of just general stats really. But yeah, I'll pull up some of the code in terms of the dev experience. It was it's quite nice, felt fairly straightforward. We sort of came up with some quite nice patterns to kind of keep things neat, preserving sort of making it easy to track the execution order and sort of separate everything into sort of file paths. We sort of kind of stuck to this pattern quite early on. But yeah, everything kind of wasn't too bad for the experience. Things that were slightly more tricky than others were stuff like tracking uniqueness, taking statistics over like timeframes, time periods, just stats in general, really. But we did come up with some fairly clean patterns to kind of get around all of this. So yeah, the experience was quite nice in general. Things that are slightly hard as well were debugging when deploying the subgraph. Sometimes there's a lot of iteration that was kind of slow, but I think we have something in the mix for that. We want to automatically generate unit tests to be able to debug the same locally. So hopefully any of the things we had minor issues with, we'll be able to patch up. Be good. But yeah, the experience was quite nice in general. So yeah, that's a brief one from me. That's it. Any questions at all?
Not seeing yet, but would be great to share the GitHub repo for this one if folks want to check out the source code. Yeah,
for sure. It's currently in PR at the moment, but I'll show you the link for the PR.
Thank you. And then Yaniv is asking a question that I believe you've already answered, which is any performance numbers to share. I believe you mentioned an 8x improvement, was it?
Yes, it's an eightfold, sorry, 8x improvement. Yeah, it was from 2 months before to a week.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, I see Vincent is also in the chat. I'd be curious to know if you folks have been working on other subgraphs, like porting existing ones, like big ones that are known for taking a lot of time indexing, if you've seen other or similar performance increase.
I don't think there's anything else that's large that's quite ready yet. I think this was the first one, but working on stuff like Uniswap v2 and got a couple others in the mix. But yeah, this is the first one we've got actually deployed to the hosted service so far.
Yeah, Vincent is saying that is also working on the Uniswap v2, as you mentioned, work in progress.
Yeah.
You did have some, yeah, Yaniv, was there any functionality that you felt you couldn't implement with Substreams yet?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is it's just storing of large values in general when processing through the chain. So stuff like tracking uniqueness was kind of hard. There's a certain threshold which is fairly low for storing a list of values and checking through it. So yeah, uniqueness was hard. We had to drop a couple things from that. Yeah, some of the aggregation stuff was a little clunky, but it wasn't too bad to implement. But yeah, it's mainly just tracking of sort of lists of values, which we couldn't do, but yeah, it's fine.
I see also BK asking if there are any plans to share documentation on how to optimize the development experience, like you were showing. Anything you can remind us?
Yeah, I wrote a couple of documents on this, so I'll have to share them in maybe the working API group or something like that. But yeah, there are definitely some patterns that we worked out that made it a lot simpler for building this stuff. In particular, just separating out the module code into files was quite nice just on its own. But yeah, there's a proper worksheet somewhere, so I'll copy the link for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, there was a pretty lovely discussion in yesterday's working group meeting just around some of the patterns and like anti-patterns when it comes to developing substreams. So we're looking to flesh out the substreams documentation to have more examples of what to do, but I think in also some cases what not to do, because there are some things which you shouldn't necessarily try and do in substreams where there's a sort of more native way. So yeah, definitely looking to keep track of those as people are building more substreams.
Thanks, Adam. I think it's also worth pointing out that there's nothing in the protocol stopping us from getting these onto the network, meaning no protocol changes. So as things are maturing and we're adding robustness to the whole stack, we should, like, indexes should get ready with Firehose for Ethereum, for instance, because that's really the only, let's say, backend component required to get ready to start serving these substreams powered subgraphs on the network, right? I'm not sure if you want to speak to that as well, Adam, or if there's much more to say really at this point.
Yeah, no, I think the only thing would be obviously outside the normal sort of experimental feature approval, like feature matrix sort of step, but yes, there's nothing like a subgraph, a substream based subgraph looks exactly the same outside. Obviously the manifest is a bit different and points to slightly different sort of files, but yeah, it's that's the quite neat thing about this integration, I guess.
Very cool. Looking forward to seeing that on the network for sure. Simon, you always have questions about subgraphs and substreams features. Anything you want to add? Last 4 minutes.
A question about substreams.
Yeah.
I'm not prepared. Let me think.
I was just wondering, you always have something to ask during these sessions.
Yeah, I want to know. Yeah. So with this implementation, is the substreams configured to directly write into the Postgres sync, or is there still a mappings file so that it's done kind of in a classical subgraph way?
We just return the output from our last module as a set of entity changes. Is that what you were sort of looking for? But yeah, that gets mapped into a bunch of table updates. And that's done at the graph node side of things.
Okay, so it's the schema is written as a schema GraphQL, and then the substreams more or less directly write into that database as the schema expects it to be.
Yeah, so this is like an example of our last module. We're just returning a set of these structures. So it's every single entity we have. We just return like a list of kind of field modifications, sort of with the difference in values at each block. And these get mapped at the graph side into the corresponding Postgres updates.
Okay, cool. That makes sense.
Cool.
All right. Thank you so much, Robin, and the whole Masari team for building this and sharing. We'll be waiting to see more of these for sure, and hopefully on the network soon as well. And more importantly, see also more developers building with this stack. And if you want to share some feedback on this, there's a Substreams Discord channel. So feel free to reach out. The Streaming Fast team has always been monitoring that channel as well, and all other core development teams that are working on this new feature, let's say. So yeah, do reach out. Want to hear some feedback while we're still in this early stage, let's say, but very promising tech for sure, as we just saw.
Great.
So I don't see any. Oh, sorry, Robin, you were going to say something.
Oh, nothing.
Cool. Well, we're at the top of the hour. I don't see any other question. I think that's all for today. So thank you all for joining once again. This will be on YouTube as always, and show notes from Ethan, community member, and Annie also helping out now. We'll be sharing these on the forum as well. So thanks all. I'll see you in a month. Bye.